Okay, we got this going. All right, Comic Binge, welcome. My music took a while there to link up, but all right, today we got Man of Steel. We've got tons of great guests. Got a rad new video that someone made for us. You'll meet him very shortly. But thank you for coming in and joining us for the Comic Binge. Yeah, Man of Steel, John Byrne. Let's get into it, guys. I'm excited. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, all that jazz, all that crazy stuff. And yeah, let's get into it. I am your host, Paul Herman. And with me is our good friend here, Chris. Chris, hello, Chris.
Hello, sir.
Hello. And with me, we also have Garrett. Garrett, say hello.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about it.
Excellent. Yes, I'm excited about it too as well. And Justin.
Hello. Hello
How
there.
we all doing?
Doing well.
Excellent. I'm very excited. This is going to be very, very exciting. I can't wait to do all this. It's going to be crazy nuts. Can anyone see the video? I'm very concerned that it's just not working. Chris, can you see
I just see the image
You just
of
have the
Superman.
logo overlaying.
I
right
know.
Now.
This
Do you
is
want to
very
take it
intimidating.
off?
Oh, I don't know what's going on here. Oh, this
There
is
you
why.
go.
I'm not sure what happened there. That was crazy.
I just
All right,
did
sorry
that.
about. Did you?
Yeah.
Something's going crazy here. I'm not sure. My computer is going super slow for whatever reason. So anyway, thanks everyone for the technical difficulties. So it's just the way it is here in Comic Binge Land. Thanks for joining us here. So today we're joined together because one person. I'm going to give him all the credit in the world, and that's going to be Garrett. Garrett, you're the reason the show today exists. So I want you. Yeah, it's all you. It's all you. It's your fault.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it's all you. It's all you. So my question is, I asked you. I'm like, we haven't had you on. We have you back on. You know, have some fun. I asked you, what do you want to talk about? Just give me something. We'll talk about whatever you want. You just tell me. And you said Man of Steel, John Byrne. I went, oh, okay. That sounds very interesting.
Like 1986? Is that what we're talking about here, Garrett? And I'm like, yeah, 1986.
He's not the Bendis one, right?
Yeah.
I think the Bendis one is not that bad personally. That's just me though.
Different show. Different show, Paul.
Different show. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I understand.
It's going to be like that.
I can already tell. I can already tell. So anyway, so Garrett, why did you want to be joined on this show today? Or not joined, but why did you want to pick Man of Steel today?
You know, we can get into it. I mean, later I'm sure we'll talk about, experiences with the story and everything else. But
yeah.
I just so happened to have been reading a lot of John Byrne Superman stories. Recently released hardcover collected edition. I got volume 1 here. And, Man of Steel, the limited series, has been a favorite of mine, like almost my entire life. And, but I hadn't always gone back and reread a lot of the ongoing issues. He was on, 2 of the titles for 2 years and did, other limited series and everything else. I haven't always gone back and revisited those. So after I, got through the front 6 and then started digging into the monthlies, I'm like, man, I really just enjoy this era of Superman. Superman's, one of my favorite characters. And I said, I'm reading this right now. What about talking about this? And you said, okay, cool. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And here we are.
Let's do it. Here we are. That's exactly how it happened. So, and I gotta say, I'm happy you did, because I'll get into my take here in a second. But yeah, John Byrne's always, he's an icon, right? He's an icon in the comic book industry. He's done tons of stuff, which we'll get to on the binge at some point. So, Justin, we'll kind of start with you, I guess, with everything. We'll kind of go with you first. What's your history with Man of Steel, and what are your feelings on it when you first read it? If you didn't read it, I'm assuming you read it a long time ago.
Yeah.
But if you didn't, since you did, what were your feelings on it then to now, like comparatively?
Yeah, with Man of Steel, it was, man, when I got into DC Comics, you kind of got bombarded with like the must reads type of thing, and so Man of Steel was definitely like, oh, you got to read Man of Steel, because I remember my comic book shop guy, he was really great at like, oh, if you like Batman Year One, you should read Man of Steel type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so anyways, I read it to me, it was kind of like, oh, this is Superman's origin. Just it's it felt familiar. I was real young though. I mean, I was like, I don't know, 12 or something like that when I read it. But what it did is it kind of put me on this like, I got real confused by comic numbering because I was like, wait, Adventures of Superman? Because Superman, like those are in action, so I was kind of like, wait, what's what? Because I remember I got a whole stack of like Superman comics from a buddy. He was like, here's a bunch of comics I have. I don't want Superman ones. And so he gave them to me. And I remember one was like Adventures of Superman. It was like a Jerry Ordway cover, and it had like Superman with lightning hitting his chest. And I think in it, he kisses Wonder Woman for like the first time. And so anyways, I just got real like excited about like Superman because of this. It kind of changed. It was my real first comic of Superman that I read, I think. Besides some like old like Silver Age ones my uncle gave me, like this is the first modern Superman I ever read. And so anyways, it was just, I don't know if I was excited. I just read it. Like I read everything that was given to me then, but like now I think I feel a little differently about it. That I've kind of figured out who my Superman is. And the way I look at it now, I don't particularly love it out of all the Superman origin stories. I get its place in history, but I think it's a great stepping stone into just Byrne's run on Superman and everyone who followed up on that. Because I think Superman from Man of Steel all the way up until like the Death and Return saga is like probably one of the best runs of a character in comics.
Like ever.
Really?
Yeah.
In my opinion,
I think
it's I can't think of any real like lulls there. Like I think I have most of those runs from like the 80s all the way up to like 93, whatever. Anyways, sorry, that was a lot, but that was kind of like
no, this is perfect. I love it.
Yeah, but looking back on that, I think that I appreciate what it is, but there are, and I'll probably get into it later, but there are other origins I feel like I appreciate and like better because I think they're told more like as a complete story. Where Man of Steel, there's a lot of time jumps, and I think that they lost me a bit. So, anyways,
all right.
Enough of that. Enough of my rambling.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you this now.
Yes.
And we can get into it later. Do you think this is a comic book masterpiece, Man of Steel?
Oh man.
You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer it now. You can, if you want to wait, you can. That's fine.
I will answer it. I mean, I don't think it's a masterpiece. I think it's definitely historically important to comics. Because this was the first reboot of Superman, right? Like they, when Byrne did this, like he was fresh off Marvel. Giordano hired him, right, and was like, we don't know what we're doing after Crisis. There wasn't a great follow up to Crisis. Like, okay, now that we reset everything, what the heck's happening? Because everything didn't really roll out. Wonder Woman and Batman and Superman, they all didn't roll out at the same time.
They didn't.
No, I think
no, it's pretty goofy.
Yeah, like Batman's was in 87, Superman was in 90 and then
wait, hold on, because here's the thing. Because when I was reading these books, I swear I saw promos for year one. And I saw promos for Wonder Woman too.
You probably did on year one. I think this ran July to September of 86. In September of 86, you likely would have started to see some promos.
Yeah.
So like in like issue 6, I wouldn't be surprised. It was earlier that I would be surprised. I'm not saying it wouldn't be there.
Wonder Woman #1 had a cover date of February of 87. So it's possible that it hit in December of 86, but it was a bit afterward. They were staggered quite a bit.
Yeah. And it's always tough to tell. Anytime you're going back and doing research, it's so like cover date versus pull off the shelf date. Yeah. Like that has changed
usually about
so often.
2 months on that.
Right. Yeah, so that could very easily be. And when I say July to September on this, I don't know if that was actually published or if those were the cover date. Well, I suppose we can look real close on the screen right there. It's not there.
I have the issue. I have the single issues here, and I know I can tell you that there's the Wonder Woman. They were definitely planning Wonder Woman because there's a big ad for it. Actually, I'm trying to see if I can find it. It must be in issue 6 because I was really surprised. I'm like, oh wow, they actually are promoting this. Like it was a huge thing in the middle of the book. It was like its own like right here. So you guys can see. This is what it says.
The Perez run, which is crazy because it's like DC editorial didn't have this like fully formed, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to roll out plan post Crisis. And you ended up with like, the whole thing with Crisis is let's make the continuity more accessible and not have as many complications and screw ups, and shrink the multiverse all the way down. And you immediately started running into problems with how characters met. Or like Hawkman was, I think, one of the biggest issues right away.
Hawkman still's got issues.
Always, it's always comes out of Hawkman.
But Venditti, dude, I heard Venditti did a good job. I've heard.
Oh, yeah.
I read a little bit of that and I liked it. I need to finish it. I heard he made it better. That's what I heard.
Yeah, it's a great run.
I think really John's. Good. I mean, that's a whole show. Never mind. I won't talk about it.
Yeah. We'll bring you back for that one eventually too.
Let's talk about
so,
but Superman, Man of Steel. Sorry, is it a masterpiece? No. Historically, it's important. I think it's a.
But is that the same thing? Isn't that
no?
Really?
Okay. There's terrible things in history that are historically significant, but they're not great situations, right? So like,
but this is, I mean,
masterpiece is like, oh man, like Watchmen's a masterpiece, right? I don't know if Man of Steel's on that level. I think we can debate it. I just think
fair.
Yeah. So
here's
I'm ready. I'm ready for the debate. I'll be poised. No.
Okay.
We'll wait. We gotta even let Clow get in here. I'm not gonna start rambling and writing.
In the end, whatever Chris says, I'll just agree with.
Clow's really smart. I mean, it sounds right to me. I mean, he's the professor.
I feel like he's the reverend. He's the reverend.
But yeah, he's of the House of L. He's probably like the most well versed in all Superman.
That's true. He's him. Michael Bailey are the biggest Superman fans I know. So, Chris, give us your take on Man of Steel and your history with it.
In terms of history, the first time I actually encountered this series wasn't even the book. I was at a big bookstore in Portland, Oregon when I was about 7 years old. And they had this, which is DC Comics, 60 Years of the World's Favorite Comic Book Heroes, written by Les Daniels. This was an extraordinarily important book to my development as a DC Comics fan because it's an exhaustive history from the 30s up through about 1995. So that was where I first read about Man of Steel and familiarized myself with the specifics of what Man of Steel came in on the heels of, which was Crisis on Infinite Earths. Yeah. And I didn't actually read the series until a couple of years later. And, it set the tone for everything that I expect from what Superman's world looks like and what the character's priorities are, what his supporting cast is like. It was extraordinarily important to creating a baseline for Superman. As years have gone on, it has become less important to me. I guess I guess I view John Byrne kind of like the way that Jewish folks view Jesus, a very important figure, but not the Messiah. So, I don't think that. I mean, it's impossible to overstate just how important Byrne's work was to modernizing Superman. And I'm sure that we'll get into some of the specifics about how exactly he accomplished that, but he did so much to scrape away a lot of the barnacles, as he said himself, including just like a really smart redesign of the costume, a really potent change up to the supporting cast. To me, maybe his most important contribution to Superman is the audacity of having his parents still alive when he's Superman. And I mean, it's hard for me to feel like something isn't missing when his parents aren't around. Like it's so indelible to his identity. And that's because of the Man of Steel. But at the same time too, in the intervening 35 years that have passed since this story came out, other people have had the chance to take a crack at this arguably the most important origin story in comics. And it's possible that other people might have done it better. Did they do it in as transformative of a way as John Byrne? That I don't know.
Ooh, that's good.
But I don't think that you can overstate the importance of this story. I would probably say that, I mean, just in terms of Byrne's work, I think it is a masterpiece. I think that his work on Superman stands up with X-Men, and it stands up with the Fantastic Four. And he had such creative freedom to do so much with Superman. He left an indelible impression on the character that persists today. And a lot of people, similarly to myself, see the Man of Steel as a baseline for what they think Superman should be. So you cannot discount the importance of this story in particular, and I would never even presume to do so.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point, Chris, like how big of an impact that he had on the character. And what is really pretty shocking to look at now is how much freedom DC gave him to do that. And obviously we've got decades and decades of storytelling before that, but it's, Superman was still, at this point, arguably their biggest character, right up, with Batman and probably even just a bit ahead of Batman at this point, leading into, Crisis on Infinite Earths and Man of Steel. But there had been this feel that things have gotten a bit too wild, a bit too stale. The power set had grown to these uncontrollable depths where it was writing the character in a tangible way that connected with audiences was starting to really be a concern. And they had tried to depower him a bit, even, pre-Crisis. But, what Byrne does here, to me, Paul, you didn't ask me, but I'll say it. I think it's a masterpiece. Whether we're talking about just the 6-issue limited run or Byrne's 2 years of work on, multiple ongoing titles.
Yeah. He wrote about 6 years worth of stories. And
it's crazy. Yeah. It is crazy. The world building, is so incredible to me. And I'll say this. I love Byrne's Superman. It still rings true to me as like, it's very formative to what my expectations of the character are. But I am glad that that Superman, after Byrne's run, continued to develop and didn't stay where it was. But I think this is such a great foundation for where the character went. And Justin, to your point, all the way through, it's one of the longest runs of comics that we've had that I'm aware of, and that I was really invested in, where it felt like whatever creators were on the character were telling a singular story with a consistent version of this character. Like Byrne's Superman and Man of Steel, to me, is the exact same Superman that Jurgens is writing in Death and Return. It's just like this consistent thing that we don't get that kind of time frame anymore. Yeah. So to me, it's a masterpiece, and it's pretty incredible. But I do understand some of the criticism. The time jumps between issues, right? There's a lot of story left untold that to get to where DC wanted the character to be in the ongoing, I think, and we're Byrne, because it was really kind of Byrne's call, right? Like they did some of those shortcuts and time jumps. Yeah, I can understand when people go back. It's like, it feels a little clunky, maybe.
Part of that is just Crisis, because coming out of Crisis, there was an editorial edict that no one remembered what had happened there, and DC didn't want to waste time, or I guess no, that's not correct. Byrne didn't want to spend additional time in giving Superman time as Superboy. He just threw him in as Superman. That was one of the things that he ejected. He later said that he regretted that because DC wanted to jump right in with a character that was already a fully formed hero. And I mean, over the course of this, you see several months have passed. Now 5 years have passed. So it does jump around quite a lot. And conceivably, like the entire history of the DC universe that all of the characters play with up until that point has transpired. But I guess one of the places that this one loses a little bit of luster to me, just in terms of its longevity, is that when I look at particularly the other two Trinity origin stories that came out around this time, I feel like the writing and the storytelling, specifically in the first part of Perez's Wonder Woman, and of course Year One, it transformed the way that comics were written. I mean, reading this again, it struck me how this moment, which is such a pivotal moment in the first issue, they all wanted a piece of me, something that's really well called back to by the death of Superman. Yeah. It does kind of poetically rhyme with this moment in Batman Year One.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're both sitting in a dark room, and they're both trying to contemplate what their purpose is going to be going forward. So I like that component of it. But at the same time, too, you know, Byrne is very much a product of kind of a different kind of storytelling, an earlier kind of comic book storytelling. And Miller was trying to push a little bit more of a semblance of modernity in the way that the stories are told, particularly like thought balloons, right? Like there's a lot of thought balloons in Man of Steel. And I feel like maybe there's a little too much information overload by the time we get to issue number 6. A lot of things are expressed through an internal thought balloon monologue that's kind of an information dump about Superman discovering where he's from.
Well, and really quick, I want to interject on that a little bit because that's one of the things I liked about it, to be honest, because I think the one thing that I would say about the difference between like this and year one is year one takes the narration to a different level that I think Frank Miller, like the whole like thought balloon, like Frank Miller took that out. Like he was like, I'm not doing that. And he made it not cool. And I think obviously comic book writers, as I've been reading Spider-Man chronologically through the ages, and I'm in the 90s or almost the 90s now, I can tell you that just writers alone would rest on their laurels of inner monologues and too much. And I think Man of Steel, one of the main, I would say arguments, or not arguments, but one of the main criticisms of it, or cons, if you will, would be there's a lot of inner monologues. Now, that being said, I do think and I'm curious what you guys think. I already know what you kind of think, Chris, but I'm curious what Justin and Garrett think. I actually miss thought balloons, not because we already get those still with the protagonist. We have those with the captions like we saw with year one, right? But that's the normal now. What we don't get is narration and thought balloons and what the villains or even the supporting characters are thinking. We only know what usually the protagonist thinks, not what the antagonist thinks. But as I'm reading all these old comics, including with Man of Steel, we get everyone. We get the idea what everyone's thinking in narration. And you know what? It's a lost art because writers don't want to reveal what other people are thinking. And I think the problem with doing that is you're not utilizing all the tools in the tool shed. And that's a lost thing in comic book storytelling in general. And I think that to me, I know it's not cool to have it, but you know what? There's better ways of doing it the right way and not having it be information overload at the same time and not being cheesy. But it is definitely a lost art. And I would definitely say, though it's a criticism of, I think, Man of Steel, because it compresses so much information at once. That being said, I actually enjoyed it a lot, and it really helped me get into the story more. I mean, this is a great.
There's a lot going on.
Like there's more thought balloons than clouds.
but you know, but this would be captions now. This would be captions, and there's no difference there. There's no difference. I'm talking about when you have the hero or the antagonist, and you have like the supporting characters when their inner monologues and things like that.
Well, all I'll add is that just in this moment at the end of the 6th issue, he does he being Byrne lays all this groundwork to funnel into this moment, and I think that makes it worth it. Because this is really like the emphasis. The fact that the story ends with "It is Earth that makes me human" is one of the single best contributions that Byrne ever made to Superman.
Beautiful.
Because
I get a little goosebumpies just right now. Remember,
I know,
I love it so much.
I mean, the emphasis on the humanity.
All right, Justin. All right.
But the emphasis on the humanity is a key component of this. I wish Zack Snyder read this story, frankly.
Wow. Really quick.
I was gonna say it if Chris didn't say it.
Yeah, we have 6 people watching. Please like the video because it helps people get out there. And if you haven't already subscribed, thank you very much. Anyway, I disagree with what you said a little bit there, but that's a whole different podcast. I don't want to get into that. But I'm curious what's your take on the thought bubbles and things like that? Like, you guys are anti the thought balloons for other characters?
It's a storytelling device to me. Like what I like about thought balloons when they're done right, I mean, I see it as like I have thought balloons in my head all the time, like when I'm in a situation. And so I feel like internal monologue is sometimes your honest thoughts, maybe in when what you say throughout your mouth is sometimes maybe that's a showing of confidence or restraint. You don't say all the things you're thinking, right? But in a sense of like with Man of Steel, like it is, whether it's a thought balloon or a word bubble, like it's just Superman communicating to us, like so we know his story, we know his heart, we know his his agenda of truth and justice, right? Like we're just getting his story. And I never thought balloons were uncool, you know? Like in year one,
really
thought balloons are just
out
journal entries. That's all it is.
Exactly.
It's not a thought balloon, it's a journal entry. And so it's just a choice, you know?
But even in Dark Knight Returns, there's not a lot of thought balloons, if any, I don't think. So Garrett, what was your take on thought balloons in general?
I always enjoy when I go back and read older comics where they're prevalent, because it feels like you get more time with the characters you love. Right. I'm getting more insight to their thoughts. And I think there's ways, Dark Knight Returns is a great example. Year One's a great example of doing something, having an approach to that and doing it in a different way that maybe lets you be a bit more artistic. I think that's, what Miller was trying to do. But then I think where we've come today, and there's writers I can name, I know it's not very nice to do that, where they are so over reliant on the captions. And I'm not spending any more time with my characters that I came to read. I'm spending so much more time with that author, with James Tynion IV. I'm spending so much more time with the authors and the author's thoughts, and I'm not getting the insights into the character. And too often, Paul, the point you make, you only get to those insights from one character or from the narrator of the story. Like, it's awesome in here. I really enjoyed reading Lex Luthor's thought bubbles. Like, I don't know the last time.
Yes.
Because that's the real Lex. The real Lex exists in his thoughts.
Yeah.
It's funny. I do have a pretty core fundamental criticism with this story when it comes to Lex Luthor.
Well, hold on. Before we go crazy on Lex Luthor, I have one last thing I want to add about the thought balloons, really quick. Before we'll pivot to Lex.
We'll do it. Hurry, come on.
I know. But I just want to say about what you said about Tyrion IV, whatever his name is. I think the reason why, whatever his name is, I don't know. I'm terrible. Everyone knows I can't pronounce anyone's names.
So you and Peter Vera, yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I would say why I think that maybe he struggles with solo characters is like, when I love the detective run he did. I know you didn't like it, Justin, but I would say that there's not a lot of captions because it's an ensemble piece. And so you can bounce off ideas and get in better stories and get more out of your characters when you're interacting with them more. And this is a lot of problems with writers in general. Like you said, I don't think they're all bad, but they depend so much on the inner monologues with them only. You forget someone like Lex Luthor that I love getting inside of those characters' heads. Let's do it more, people. So anyway, speaking of Lex Luthor, Chris, take it away.
Well, all I'll add, because I'm on the record on this show as being I'm not against thought balloons, but I do think it's a passé device. And generally speaking, there are writers that are an exception, of course, but I feel like narrative boxes, as opposed to thought balloons, encourage additional brevity on the part of the writers so that it doesn't get in the way of the image. That's the primary thing that I like the most.
But narration, I would say there's less narration. There's more more inner monologues, captions.
I mean, it depends on the writer. Each writer is going to approach it differently, but I think there is a greater emphasis among some creators, particularly certain writer-artist combos, that will avoid over explanation through monologue, whether it's thought balloons or narration boxes, to try and express more of the emotion through the images as opposed to just telling you what you should be thinking. I mean, take advantage of the visual medium. That's my thing with it.
Yeah. And I think the problem is, and honestly, I think one of the cons of it, he goes a little too far at times, but at the same time, I actually really appreciate it. And I think we all can agree we got a lot out of this book. They compress so much information and so much stuff.
In this case, it was probably necessary because it's such a fundamental reorganization of Superman in comparison to what the stories looked like just a few years earlier. So the necessity to relay a ton of information that way does a lot of favors to like the mechanics of how Superman is going to work going forward. So
and I think the accessibility of it too always stands out to me, because what Byrne does in this is, when we think about the purpose that this run exists, is to reintroduce the character to a broader audience, right? To make the continuity in DC Comics in general post-crisis to be more accessible and also to modernize in some ways, that having those thought balloons made for continually easy entry points, whether or not you had read the previous issue. Maybe you just grab this off the newsstand in issue 3 or issue 6, right? If you get 6, man, you get a real download as to like, hey, what's formed in this character? What can you expect?
Which is frankly kind of what Superman goes through himself in that issue, right? His brain is blasted with an incredible amount of information.
Yeah.
And he has to compartmentalize it and digest it properly before he ultimately makes the conclusion that being a Kryptonian doesn't make him any less human, which is...
And it's crazy from a storytelling wise that like that so impactful, like just an amazing way to wrap up the series, that all that information was held back until issue 6. Like, I think if people haven't read this in a while and you go back to read it, you might be surprised about how little is known by Superman about his own origin, or by his parents about his own origin, the way until the final issue of the limited series. Like it's pretty wild, really.
And that's something that's pretty unique to Man of Steel, because if you take a look at, whether it's Birthright or whether it's Secret Origin or what Grant Morrison did in a couple of issues of New 52 Action Comics, like he knows his lineage pretty close to right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the source of Superman's costume, right? When he starts off in the New 52, so
I've got a lot of thoughts on that, but I don't want to try and jump into that when you were gearing up to talk about Lex.
All right,
we'll do New 52 stuff, I'm sure, at some point. But let me go back to Lex Luthor, because Luthor, what the way that this series conceptualizes him, that is great. Like the idea of transforming him into what a contemporary villain of the time, and frankly a contemporary villain up through today, looks like. It did such extraordinary service to creating a more relatable threat for Superman, but it also, in a weird way, helps to illustrate the triumph of Lex Luthor's own ingenuity. My issue with the way, and Byrne and really anyone at DC Comics will explain as well, that that's an idea that came from Marv Wolfman. Wolfman was in the Superman bullpen. I mean, he was really one of the architects of the DC universe right up to Crisis and for several years afterward, understandably and deservedly so.
Yeah.
But Wolfman's that's a conception that came from him, and he deserves a ton of credit for cracking that and for making it work. And it's something that persists today. Like nowadays, I think by the time you got to Infinite Crisis, you got to see like a composite, like a hybrid version of the businessman and the mad scientist together. And I like that a lot, but you don't get to the businessman without Byrne and Wolfman. But my issue really comes down to these moments in issue number 5, I believe, or 4. I think it's number 4. The source of Luthor's hatred for Superman, it comes from nothing other than like being embarrassed by Superman arresting him, which the mayor told him to do anyway. And it seems very thin on the ground. Like it doesn't matter all that much in the long run, but to have that as like the key kickoff inciting incident for the most legendary rivalry in all of comics.
Excuse me, sir.
Seems a little thin.
May I interject, please?
It depends.
Here's the deal. I'm a little surprised that you didn't really, because here's the deal. Like I'm a little surprised you're not into it as much as I thought you would be as far as Lex Luthor, because the mad scientist I feel is always there in some ways. Now that being said, it was
heavily de-emphasized at this point. Like Luthor just pays mad scientist right here.
But again, I'm not as worried about that, because to me the most important thing is, why does Lex hate Superman? And I actually bought into it. I'm curious what you other guys think about this, because it didn't bother me. And Garrett, you're the one who probably loves it the most, besides I would say all of us, or besides Chris. You might like it more than Chris, I don't know. But I want to ask you, for me, when I read this, I actually liked the idea that he owns Metropolis, right? Like he owns this whole city, and everything's under his thumb. Like even Lois Lane, at least the impression that I got, and you guys can check in. And maybe I'm telling you I'm insane. It feels like even she was almost like, like I kind of maybe I'll be with Leg, like she was and she wasn't. Like she wasn't into him, but she wasn't like completely not into him. If that makes any sense.
Yeah,
so so really quick, I'll throw it to you, Garrett. But I like the fact that he could own everybody, and then he couldn't. And then when something good comes in, like Superman, and then upends him, and the mayor's like, "You need to arrest this guy." He's like, "Wait a minute. Like this kind of sucks. I can't own this guy, and I'm being turned on. Like F you." Like that's what it felt like to me, and I bought into it. Garrett, what was your take?
I see Klaus' point. It's kind of condensed into this, but I think
I agree to that.
It's like you sort of the concept around it gets sort of squeezed into this moment, and it might just be a little bit too fine of a point on it. But I love the concept of Lex being this incredibly powerful, very public, owns most of the city, but his narcissism is just so deep that the introduction of somebody that could not only just take the shine off of him, and the focus on who he is and what he's done for the city, or who he is in his own mind, but the presence of Superman is so insulting to him that it's immediately this grudge. Now it gets pinpointed in this like, "Oh, you arrested me and I'm embarrassed" thing. Yeah. But I think the sort of platform that stands on is, I am diminished because of someone else's rise, in renown or whatever else. Even to the point, he's powerful, he's good looking, he's, the city loves him, and now he is holding me accountable in a way that my ego is incapable of handling. Exactly. Now, as the run goes on, and we go from old Lex, kind of out of shape Lex, and then he clones himself years later, and then kind of becomes a bit more traditional Lex, even though he's
about that.
Yeah, he had the long flow going,
It was
amazing. It was
amazing.
Dating Supergirl, like it was a whole deal, right?
Yeah.
And so I like where they ultimately end up with it, because this Lex had kind of think the whole motivation not being, I will take this over, we knew each other as kids, and Clark had an experiment that blew off my hair any day of the week, right? Like, to me, that was always the lamest reason for a rivalry. Like Superman showing up and just destroying this guy's, like warped sense of self-worth, like that I can get into.
Yeah. Agreed. I was going to say that pretty much the same thing. It's like, you're the most powerful man in the city, right? And then all of a sudden, Superman shows up, and he has a different kind of power. And I think Lex is cool with them until he's not corruptible. The moment Superman doesn't like play ball with Lex, now he's a problem. And you're right, like the whole ego thing. It's like, wait, you've embarrassed me where I've had power and sway before. Now I don't have that. I don't have it at all. And
he took he's the only person to take it away from him.
Yeah, and I feel like Superman's appearance almost empowers people around him to stand up
exactly
as well.
Yes.
And so he really is the symbol of hope. His arrival in Metropolis empowers everyone. And so
inspires them too. Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, exactly. And so I think that's why Lex is like, dang, like I can't. He inspires people through manipulation.
Exactly. And money.
Being a good person. There we go. And that's it. That's why Lex don't have that. Lex.
I love it. I love this. Like I
don't disagree. I don't disagree with any of that. I just think that in terms of the inciting incident, it happens too fast, and a lot of the inclinations that you guys describe come from later stories, not necessarily the Man of Steel.
You're 100% right, Chris, on that.
And
is he though?
I think there's
because there's years of storytelling that's inferring this opinion that I have, right?
But also,
I'm just going by the comic itself. Personally.
To me, but the thing that I would have no issue with this as the thing that sets them off on the wrong foot, because at this point where he actually does arrest Luthor on the orders of the mayor, Luthor doesn't know that he's an extraterrestrial yet.
Right.
Nope. And so much of, and this is just a personal taste thing. in my mind, one of the things that makes the Superman Lex Luthor rivalry so compelling is that Luthor, because of where Superman comes from, sees everything that he represents as a threat against the human experience, you know, and that's something that also comes from later stories. But the strength of the rivalry really does come from the fact that here's a guy who is human and who accrued so much power through a lot of nefarious means in a lot of cases. Yeah. And here's someone who came from somewhere else who manages to show us more how to be human than one of our own, you know? Yes. So yeah. I just think that the basic reason for just him saying at the end of that issue, you're a dead man, is a little too thin. If they had saved it, if Byrne had saved it for like 1 or 2 issues later, where it really does turn into the legendary rivalry that it is, I felt it would have been a little bit stronger. But that takes nothing away from the conception of Luthor in the story, which is timeless, and just the conception of Superman in the DC universe going forward after this.
Preach it, Reverend.
Key, critical,
Preach it.
Important.
Preach it. Thank you.
And one other thing that I quickly wanted to mention,
please,
in terms of contributions that Byrne made to Superman.
Yes.
It's the costume, man. Like, there's just something about the way that he draws I will. There's something about the way he draws the costume. You know, like I feel like the cape doesn't get enough service, like in live action. Man of Steel came close. 2013 Man of Steel came pretty close.
Man of Steel was pretty on the money on it.
Being a majestic kind of cape. But like in a lot of movies that you see, and certainly like the George Reeves show, and even Christopher Reeve to a certain extent, it's like the cape is just wide enough that you can see that it's covering his back. Yeah. But here it's got wingspan. Here it's like a fully majestic addition to his silhouette as he flies. Yes. And like darkening the shade of blue, like one of the things that I thought was really cool out of issue number 3, the comparison between like Batman and Superman especially when they stand side by side with each other. It's like Superman's costume might be a little bit darker on the shade of blue outside of the highlights for Batman, which I think is kind of cool. But like darkening the blue, like to me, that's Superman. Like before under Kurt Swan and Wayne Boring, it was like kind of a lighter sky shade, which worked for its time. But it's weird how just like a touch of shade makes it seem more modern. But arguably, you know, the biggest thing is just the fact that he made the S bigger. You know, before it was very much like Superman Returns Routh, and Byrne decided to make it like shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. And you just have such a bold image that's created like this. You can't, I have not yet seen a way that you can get better than the way that Byrne designed this costume. And a lot of it is the cape and just the whole look.
This panel in particular is maybe my single favorite panel of Superman ever. Like, is my favorite depiction of Superman. Byrne's Superman costume to me has never been topped. And one of the things, Cloud, talking about the cape, it's a really weird detail, and I don't know if this will resonate for anyone else. But it's big and it's over the shoulder, and it's regal in a way that stops short of seeming like haughty that it would be the choice that Superman makes. And I think it has to do with the length. It never becomes this like royal cloak that like denotes that he is something above and beyond, like so regal that like you would see a king with a long, you know, trailing cape or cloak on. It stops kind of mid calf or just below the knee. And it's different than Batman's cape, right? Yeah. Batman's cape envelops him. It separates him. Superman's cape is like a visual identifier, and it just looks awesome, you know? Yeah. But it's not, it doesn't exist in the same way. So you say Man of Steel, I thought like the cape work, the CGI cape stuff was really cool. For some reason, I just don't like Superman's cape to go all the way to the floor. I don't like to drape behind him. Like that stop short, you know, knee or just below the knee level is perfect. And maybe it's because I grew up with this, but it feels like it's a costume choice. It's a design choice that invokes like subconscious costume ideas in my head. And it stops short of being like, look at this, I am this majesty. Look at my fancy cloak. I don't know if that works for anyone else, but
that's why I have an issue with New 52 with the collar and stuff. It makes them look super.
The collar is not right.
It's too authoritative, and it doesn't work. But I get what you're saying, Garrett. With
never liked the collar.
Yeah, with the way like Byrne's cape goes, it not that we don't know Superman's flying, right? But it's such a great way to like illustrate soaring through the air, you know?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have wings, right? But
get a lot of
like,
movement out of it.
Yeah, besides like, you know, like speed lines and flourishes like that, like yeah, like it's almost like his wings, you know, like when he's soaring and stuff. So I love that you pointed it out, Chris, because
also it has pockets. You don't see it in this story, but
now,
when I worked as a retailer, when I started work as a retailer, like around 2006, DC Direct put out Justice League Trophy Room artifacts. One of them was Superman's cape, based off of Byrne, and it had a pocket in it.
Oh,
that's where he put stuff. So
where's the pocket located, though?
In the cape, like on the
side.
Yeah, it's like if I was wearing the cape, it would be like right here, and he could like reach it, grab stuff.
Hey, get your little billfold if you need to buy something.
Is there like a little Superman crest, like zipper head?
Yeah, there was. So we actually did have one of those capes in the store. I don't remember seeing like an embroidered symbol on it. Might have had a zipper, I'm not sure, but it was the cape and his belt, and it was like on a big display stand, and you could also get things like the lantern rings and Batman's utility belt. That was like the capsule design. It was cool.
Yeah, I remember that capsule design belt.
I wonder if the pocket was as easily destructible as the cape, because in Byrne stories, man, this cape's getting ripped to shreds all the time.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things Byrne introduced, was that it's just a regular, it's remember, he's solar powered, so he's got that like aura,
like a force field.
So that's why his capes would be burning all the time. Which
that's a good point.
That's the one thing, though, I will say I kind of like Superman's suit being indestructible, because it's coming from Krypton. I can give her it's not like a deal breaker for me, but there was something about like he's so alien. Everything about him is just like defies the logic and science of our Earth. But that being said, it is kind of cool when you see Superman's like cape burning because he like walked through some fires.
Except so rad,
you know.
Well, and also his mom made it.
His mom made it.
Exactly. That's like such a huge thing for me from a character standpoint. And really, like, what Byrne does, and what I've always, like I said, Byrne's Superman's kind of my Superman. The importance of Jonathan and Martha as this creative force molding the man that Clark would become. Yeah. And to me, why it's so important, and why what Byrne did was just genius and makes it a masterpiece in my mind, is he puts the emphasis on the man and not the super for so much of the storytelling. And it's why me as a reader and somebody who loves this character has faith in this fictional character, because we see the people that developed Clark into being the man that he became. And that's the type of man we should be comfortable having these incredible godlike powers.
Yeah.
If this is simply this alien being from another world that is, you know, what Tim Burton wanted to do with his movie, and what other writers have done, you know, he's sort of, I don't know, neurotic and affected and set aside. And like, that's a person I'm not super comfortable having superpowers. But this is this man that was raised by his loving parents to have these morals and values and not to take advantage of them. Like, for some people, I know there's criticism, they made Clark a jock. I love that made Clark a jock, because they didn't know who he was. He wasn't alien to them. He was their son. He could have come from anywhere.
But he's really good.
He's really good. And then it's like, well, hang on. I think we're putting 2 and 2 together. There might be a reason why you're really good, and maybe that's not the reason you should be hyper targeting on.
Well, I mean, that's something that goes back a long time, and unfortunately it's going to persist. Superman largely is a character that is punished for being psychologically well-adjusted.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's boring. He's
so
boring because he doesn't have all this baggage and issues about how he was raised, and isn't
the
more
fact
hung
that
up
he
on his
has
home world.
the audacity to be stable.
Right.
For some reason, like that's the thing that tips people over the top, you know, like
stupid moral clarity. God,
right? Yeah, it's easier for them to believe that someone like Homelander exists as opposed to someone like Superman. And I remember going to Emerald City Comic Con in like 2009, and Greg Rucka was writing World of New Krypton at the time, and I remember someone asked him about like, well, is he gonna be seeing some other woman while he's living on New Krypton? And Rucka's like, No, he's Superman. Are you kidding? He's married to Lois Lane. And someone else was mentioning like he's too simplistic of a character. And Rucka just like, he seemed mad. And he said, what part of you died when you were 12 that you just can't believe that someone good exists who is also powerful? You know, and he's just like,
he's a genius, dude.
But also too, like the last word of the story is human.
Yeah.
And too often, like it's a take to focus more on the secular Messiah component of Superman, sure. But the thing with most of the stories that I love about Superman himself is that he understands that there are people who believe that about him, but he never believes it about himself. No. You know, if someone is in trouble, he's a man of action. It's in the word of his original book, right? He acts. He does not stand still.
Yeah.
And he does what he can just so he can help. Why that is unbelievable to people, frankly, I don't understand. But I love that Byrne emphasizes the man and the humanity that is inherent in Superman.
I love it. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Reverend, that you delivered it home perfectly, in my opinion. Just really quickly, I want to add one more thing before we go, because me and Chris were talking a lot about this yesterday. I'm curious what you guys think specifically. You know where I'm going with this, Chris. So I originally read this digitally, and I really liked it. And I always had the issues, but I recently reorganized my room, my next room over where all my comics are at. And I can actually read the single issues. Instead of reading it digitally, I actually went, I'll just pull this out and actually read it for once.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you guys, and I've complained about this before, but now I'm even more irritated. So this is Chris, put mine up. I uploaded both of them. Because this is or is this mine? Is this yours or mine? I always forget. Is this your book or my book?
There we go.
Yeah. So what I mean is this, because there's 3 different versions actually. This is the one that I was reading, and there's so much detail in this coloring. It's not, the paper sucks obviously, but the colors are very simplistic, and they're not just blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it went, but I thought I uploaded the one that I took from DC and Infinite, and it might be this one. I don't know, but this one right here, it just doesn't look as good in my opinion. It loses because the colors are so much more vibrant. You're losing a little bit of the detail, and I think of Giordano's inks are lost a little bit in this, in my opinion. So when I go back to this, I'm like, man, like I know the paper sucks, whatever, but the detail looks better. And then
I love that paper.
Yeah, I would say that paper does not suck. That paper smells like comics.
Yeah. Well, also too, though, there's a weird error on the digital version of the page. Look at Clark's vest extending out from under his arm, even up to the frame of the door. That error is on DC Universe Infinite.
Yeah, and it crosses over to his vest.
Because it's the light. It's the light that I don't know. It's like they're doing some type of light, like coming out of the.
Well, but it's not in like, because the copy that I have and that also Garrett has as well. I mean, that error does not exist on.
It's weird. It's a sloppy
newer print version.
Exact. Thank you. Yeah, but here's the thing though, too, guys. Like, I mean, you have this. Like, this looks fine. Like, doesn't look bad, all right. But when I look at so look at this page, guys. Like, the detail is more prevalent on this paper. Or on this coloring. I want to make that very clear. Right. I think on the coloring, because the problem is it's like we're losing detail, but yes, this looks good, but you're losing, I think, so much more detail because you eliminate, so make it so bright. It's like I want to see the inks, man. Like, let's see.
You get a lot of texture out of the paper itself too.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, because here's the thing: comics is best on paper, right?
You're right. Yeah.
I think that's just the casualty of modernizing all of these books, and I'm glad it's cataloged on. I can watch it on DC Universe Infinite.
Me too, man.
But yeah, there's just something about that floppy.
Tactile experience.
Well, you get into like thornier debates too about the actual preservation of the work. because Justin, I saw on your shelf behind you, you've got the Absolute Edition of Year One. I do too.
Yeah.
And it's got 2 volumes in it. One is restored coloring, and the other is original scans from first print copies that are from the archives. And it's a fundamentally different experience.
Yeah.
You know, there's just something about the way the colors were applied and the way that the actual coloring mechanism worked for mass-produced comics.
Yeah.
How much of that is part of the original authorial and artistic intent of the story?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell, and some of these creators aren't around anymore that they can tell us, but these conversations should probably be had, and the versions that the creators prefer should be preserved. Like I remember there was a deluxe edition of Year One, Batman Year One, that came out in 2012. And David Mazzucchelli hated it.
He publicly said, "Don't buy this,"
because it was printed on glossy paper. The original book, he said, was never intended to be seen that way. And the versions that were printed after that were on the paper that he preferred, with coloring applied the way that he wanted it. But also, too, like the coloring is different in the original issues. And you can see that directly in that Absolute of Year One, which I would absolutely recommend, no pun intended, to anyone, just to see what the difference is, because it does provide a bit of a different reading experience. Killing Joke, another good example.
Woo! That's
huge.
I actually don't like Boland's coloring on that. Oh, it throws.
But you have the option.
Right? I have the option, but I'm like, oh man, it's like a completely different feel and tone and everything.
It just shows you that comic books are a lot like a band, right? Everyone. I mean, anyone who plays music, which most of us here do, no offense, Chris. I know Garrett and Justin and I have all played music with people. And I got to tell you, comic books are just like a rock band. It's not just one person. It can be just one person. It can work as one person if that person's like just a complete visionary a lot of times, or, but for the most part, it is a collective effort, which is unlike a lot, like, writing a novel is usually just a couple people, whereas comic books, it's usually 5-6 people collaborating. I mean, movies is obviously a whole different level, but with comic books, it's like a band. It's literally 4 or 5 people. And if you have if you one combination's off, it can throw the whole thing.
Get out of here, Dave Navarro. Where's John Frusciante?
It can be the parts that people don't always pay the most attention to. I mean, no offense, I know a couple of bass players in there, but you change the bass player on some bands and you have a significantly different sound to certain bands. And it's not like, oh, we swapped the lead singer or lead guitarist. It's something like you didn't change the pencils, you changed the coloring, and the feels all different. Everybody's the inker. You're used to looking at, you think the pencils, the writing. But it's some of these other instruments that might not get as much love from the groupies that really can make a big difference too.
Yeah, it's true.
But it even happens with modern books too, because Batman Incorporated, Grant Morrison's Batman Incorporated, after the New 52 started, the pages in some of those issues are different because in the collected editions, they actually changed the costume from the New 52 version back to the 70s version in the flashback scenes. So on the one hand, that's probably a better choice, but you're still relegating the originally published version to back issue boxes.
Like Star Wars special editions.
Yeah. I can't think of a single Marvel collected edition that I've read, for instance, that is sourced from original scans. Yeah. So are those going to disappear entirely from people, especially people who are interested in studying the evolution of this medium going forward? This is a serious preservation issue that I hope the custodians of these stories are at least thinking about.
You know what? We need to get Alex Grand on this, because this guy probably has it all figured out, and can probably tell us, maybe help orchestrate like a comeback for it or something. And really quick, talk about the inker, and we'll wrap up here with this. Thank you everyone, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Appreciate it. If you want to know the difference an inker can make, to me, it's no better example than if you read some late 80s, early 90s Spectacular Spider-Man, where Sal Buscema, the most underrated penciler in this industry,
I love him.
Yeah. If you look at him, like all his stuff through like the late 80s to early 90s is I think it's mainly him or somebody else, but it's mainly him, I think, inking his own stuff. And it looks fantastic. Klaus Janson, amazing inker, phenomenal talent, right? He starts inking the right around the Clone Saga, he jumps on. And let me tell you, it's vastly different. And I'll tell you, Klaus Jansen's a legend. He's an amazing artist, inker. He should stay away from Sal Buscema's work as far as I'm concerned. And again, and going back to what Garrett's point, like you switch a bass player up, it's going to fundamentally change the sound behind it. It's not going to change it. It's not going to be a 180, but it's going to change, and it's not going to always be better.
There's another example too, though, like Lionel Francis Yu, when he was on New Avengers and it was either New Avengers or Secret Invasion. He was crunched, and the book was crunched that it shipped without inks, like proper inks. They actually colored over the pencils. So I'm not sure if that was something that was changed when that series was collected, but if it was, I would still like to have access to the way that the original issues looked, and I don't know if they're doing that.
You're a tracer.
I was gonna say, when are we gonna bring in Chasing Amy? How are we doing?
Wow, I love that part. So one last thing, I'll end it here, and we're gonna say we'll get our set up our pimp our stuff, whatever. Is I was oh my god, okay. On the last Marveling Star Wars, we were reviewing these comics. Forgot the penciler's name. I'm terrible with names. Go watch the video. It's a great video. Scott brought up a good point. He brought the artist who did all those pencils for the Wedge story we reviewed for the Andor prep was there are no inks. It's straight pencils. And like I was like, what? And he showed me the work. It's very interesting. So I don't know if that was a creative choice or what you're saying about Lineal U, but I gotta tell you, I love Lineal U stuff in New Avengers and Secret Invasion. That's like
Superman Birthright.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, Lineal U Secret Invasion stuff is the only reason why I'd ever read that again. Is because his art's so good. It's so good. So anyway, guys, this has been a blast. I say that for every video, but I'm just blessed to know so many amazing people that are awesome, so I'm super, this has been awesome. Garrett, you need to give me more recommendations. This is perfect. So
happy
we're going to get you on again. I always say it to my people and my homies, you're a homie, so you're going to come on again. But thank you so much for recommending this. And kind of where can people find you and your ventures, my friend?
Well, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. You could find me at Twitter. It's been great because I felt like growing up, most of my buddies were like sports guys. I had a couple comic book guys. I didn't have a lot of close friends to talk about comic books and superheroes with. And on Twitter, I found a really great group, and then like hundreds more that I interact with. So it's fun. You can find me over there. I'm at Garrett Wado. If you like listening to me talk about comic book stuff, you can listen to the Batman on Film podcast. We got episodes over there. You get some comic book reviews and film reviews on the website, batmanonfilm.com. And if you happen to like football or fantasy football, I'm the co-host of Kirk Cousins. It's a rough night last night. You can find me over at the Dynasty Dads podcast.
Or it's a routine primetime game, you could say.
I know. Hey, your old boy Russell's been not having the best year.
Hey, listen,
Geno Smith's been stepping up though. He
has, man. Hey, he's efficient. Gotta tell him that. He knows those checkdowns
at a bargain price.
Hey, fair enough.
Yeah, find me any of those places. I love talking. Big fan of talking. I'd like to keep talking with anybody that wants to.
You are, and one of the things I'm going to say that I really appreciate is the fact that we're able to disagree and have good conversations. And I know we've got some stuff on Twitter, on like in front of everyone and behind the scenes, and I just respect the hell out of you, Garrett. Like I love talking with you about stuff. You're very respectful and awesome. So
really I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, I think I lost my stuff. One sec. Chris, take over for a second.
Justin, thank you for joining us. Where can people find everything that you're a part of at the moment?
You can just follow me on Twitter at Justin M. Kowalski. I'm currently just a guy doing guest spots on various podcasts. One day maybe I'll bring back my show, but right now it's on hiatus. You know what I'm saying?
I've heard people say they want to see it again, or they want to hear it again, rather.
Yeah, so it's more of a time in figuring out a few things. So I definitely want to do it again, but just time. But in the meantime, I've done some spots on the Batman Book Club. You can check that out. A recent episode, we did a review of the Batman 1989 miniseries. continuing the adventures of Michael Keaton and Billy D. Williams. Did I like it? Listen to the show. Hey, and then I did a spot on the Batman and Film Social Hour where I talked about, I don't know, chapter 13 or something of the Batman. I don't know. It's very hard to figure out when you watch things on digital and you don't have a hard copy. But the part where spoilers, somebody dies and somebody is captured. So there you go.
It's been 6 months.
Yeah,
there's always that one person.
Statute
like,
of limitations.
I've been waiting for Christmas with my family to watch it.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Sit around the fireplace with eggnog and watch the Batman unspoiled, right. And you've ruined this for me, Kowalski.
Yeah, it's son of a gun. So yeah. Anyways, so just that. Follow me on Twitter. I've been a little vacant on Twitter, but I'll pop in here and there.
Cool.
And I was excited to be on here. I was like, oh, we're gonna talk about Man of Steel and just hang out. And
no, I'm really pleased to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Paul,
Paul's
you back?
Talking, but Paul's muted. Yeah, look at it.
I thought I unmuted it. I'm so dumb.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say, Justin, I'm very excited to see you more on Twitter. I didn't know because I know for a while you were pretty busy. You had a lot of stuff going on, and I was like, I don't want to bug him. So let's let him do his thing. And now that I know you're doing more things on Batman on Film again, and like you're on Twitter more, I'm like, this is the Justin I want to see. This is the Justin I want to see out there. I love disagreeing with you too, and I love discussing things like which you and Garrett are the same. For me as far as like discussing things, I love it. So I'm glad I'm going to get you on more again. Like both you guys, this has been a blast. So yeah, we're going to do this more soon, hopefully, and we do have some more Superman stuff coming. We are going to be eventually covering the new Superman War World saga, and that's going to be fun. We're going to have. Well, obviously this guy I should say, Chris, whatever it is. Chris will be on it. Obviously, Javi will be joining us eventually for that. And the legend himself, Michael Bailey, will be joining us eventually. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. Probably sometime in November-ish, I'd say. But when we do that, it's going to be epic, in my opinion. And it really will be. It'll be literally just me asking questions and muting myself and letting them talk. Because I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
I had a question. I did have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And I'm like, oh gosh, it doesn't have to. It could potentially be one of those like, let me ask Paul a question, and he goes on for 20 minutes, right?
You're
trying
crazy.
to wrap the show.
It's all good.
I was kind of like in all the different origins that Superman has had released, and I feel like he's the one character that's like multiple origins. Like Batman's starting to have like a few, right? But
too many. Please stop.
Yeah, it's too many. Like, do you feel that Man of Steel was pretty much, even though there's been some slight tweaks, it's kind of the definitive right now? That's kind of a can of worms, I know, but I was actually really curious about that question.
Just make it yes or no.
Yeah, yes or no.
Yes or no.
Yes.
Don't go into it. Just yes or no.
Yes.
You first, Paul.
I'll say yes.
Okay.
I struggle, but no.
Here it comes.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm with Chris too. I'm no.
Garrett?
I'm still holding on to yes.
Yeah, baby.
2v2.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Maybe that's a follow-up episode. I would love to talk to Origins because I feel like there's some really rich stuff.
You know what?
I would love to.
Well,
I would love to.
We've already covered one of them with Earth One. With Michael Bailey.
Yeah.
But now again, if you guys have watched the episode, go watch it. I mean, it's not because of me, because Michael Bailey and Chris, they are awesome.
Oh dang! I wasn't even thinking about Earth One being in that.
It's a part of it. It's an origin.
I love this book is that the inside of the cover is the first origin of Superman.
Yeah.
I have that book somewhere, Chris. When you said it, I was looking. I was like, "Where the heck is my copy of that?"
And then on the back cover is the origin.
So
of
good,
Batman.
So good.
Well, anyway, guys. Seriously, thank you so much for coming on. Like the video, guys. Subscribe. Really appreciate it. All the support. Really do. Seriously, been really appreciative of everyone. And yeah, follow the comic binge on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Follow me at Herman22 with 2 M's, aka P Thug. And Chris, did you already give your spiel?
Well, just real fast. Next time on the comic binge, we are going to be resuming our look at Infinite Crisis.
Ooh.
So it's finally time. The last episode that we did was back in July.
With the Knights of Ni.
But next time we're going to be doing the first 4 issues. And then after that, because I don't think I've ever actually listed it for people, but the episode after that, this one that's next is Infinite Crisis 1 through 4. But after that, we're diving into, because Paul insisted on doing a binge, we're getting a little crazier with a few other things that are very important, including a story that basically ends this era of Superman.
Was that GIF with from Arrested Development? I think I made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
We'll see. There's a lot of S's. There's a lot of S's in these books.
All right.
So
well,
we'll have a good time. But next time, Infinite Crisis number 1 through 4.
Same bat time, same bat channel. So anyway, I got good
Super
resist.
time. Super
Chris,
channel.
why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye.